My daughter didn't call me for 10 years, but as soon as she found out I won $8 million in the lottery, she showed up at my door begging for forgiveness. I coldly invited her to my office. When I opened the safe, darkness fell over my eyes. I grabbed my chest and collapsed to the floor. Before continuing, subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is in your region right now. The doorbell rang at 9:30 on a Tuesday morning, right when I was pouring my second cup of coffee. I'd been enjoying the quiet, the kind of peaceful October morning that makes retirement worth every penny I'd saved during 40 years of staring at spreadsheets. Phoenix mornings have this quality to them, a dry warmth that doesn't assault you the way summer does. I wasn't expecting anyone. At 67, my social calendar isn't exactly packed. When I opened the door, I almost dropped the mug. Sophie stood on my porch. My daughter Sophie, who I hadn't seen or heard from in 10 years. Not a phone call, not a birthday card, nothing. And now here she was, tears streaming down her face, her husband Lenny lurking behind her with his hands shoved in his pockets, and a teenage girl I barely recognized slouched against the porch railing, staring at her phone. "Dad," Sophie choked out, "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." For a moment, I just stood there, my accountant's brain trying to calculate the odds of this happening. 10 years of silence and she shows up on a random Tuesday? The numbers didn't add up. "Sophie?" I kept my voice neutral. "This is unexpected." I know it is. But I've been doing a lot of soul searching, and I realized how wrong I was. How wrong we were. She gestured back at Lenny, who managed something that might have been a nod. "Can we come in, please? I need to explain." I should have closed the door. Every instinct I'd honed over decades of auditing small businesses and spotting financial irregularities was screaming that something was off. But she was still my daughter, despite everything. "Come in," I said, stepping aside. They filed past me into the living room. Quinn, my granddaughter, who'd been 8 the last time I'd seen her, didn't look up from her phone. Lenny surveyed my house with what I can only describe as an appraising look, like he was mentally calculating the value of my furniture. Sophie settled onto my couch, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue she'd apparently brought with her. Prepared tears. Interesting. "Dad, I don't even know where to start," she began. Her voice had that rehearsed quality I'd heard 1,000 times from business owners trying to explain missing receipts. After everything that happened, I was angry. I blamed you for things that weren't your fault. I said terrible things. She had. I remembered every word of our last conversation, the one where she'd accused me of driving her mother away, of being cold and distant, of caring more about numbers than people. The irony was that her mother had left me for another man, but Sophie had needed someone to blame, and I'd been convenient. "I've spent these years regretting that day," Sophie continued, "missing you, missing what we had." Lenny leaned against my bookshelf, his fingers drumming against the wood, impatient. Quinn yawned, not even pretending to care about the emotional reunion happening in front of her. "That's quite a change of heart," I said, sitting in my armchair across from her. 10 years is a long time." I know it is. But people change, Dad. I've changed. We've changed." She reached back and grabbed Lenny's hand, pulling him down beside her. "We want to be a family again. We want Quinn to know her grandfather." Quinn glanced up at the sound of her name, rolled her eyes, and went back to her phone. "What made you decide this now?" I asked. "Why today?" Sophie's eyes flickered, just for a second, toward Lenny. "Does it matter? I'm here now. We're here now. Isn't that what counts?" "Timing matters in my experience," I said. "In accounting, timing is everything," Lenny snorted. "Still all about the numbers, huh, Francis? Some things never change." There it was, the contempt he'd never bothered to hide, even back when Sophie and I were still speaking. Lenny had always seen me as an obstacle, a judgmental old man who didn't appreciate his get-rich-quick schemes and his habit of borrowing money from Sophie's savings. "Some things shouldn't change," I replied, keeping my tone pleasant. "Principles, for instance." Sophie shot Lenny a warning look. "We're not here to argue. We're here to reconnect, to start over." "Start over," I repeated. The phrase sounded nice. Too convenient. We talked for another 30 minutes. Sophie shared carefully curated stories about Quinn's school, about Lenny's latest business venture, about their life. She asked about mine with what seemed like genuine interest, but her eyes kept drifting around the room, like she was looking for something. When they finally stood to leave, Sophie hugged me. It felt mechanical, performed. "We'll come by again soon," she promised. "Maybe this weekend." "Maybe," I said. I watched them walk to their car, a newer model sedan that looked expensive for someone Lenny claimed was struggling financially. Quinn climbed into the back without a word. Lenny glanced back at my house once before getting in the driver's seat, his expression unreadable. I closed the door and stood in my entryway, coffee gone cold in my hand. Something was very wrong. After 4 decades of finding discrepancies in financial records, you develop a sense for when the numbers don't match the story. And Sophie's story had more holes than a balance sheet from a failing restaurant. The question was, what was she really after? I spent the evening in my study, the room where I'd built my consulting practice before retirement, where I'd taught myself to find patterns in chaos. The desk lamp cast long shadows across my bookshelves, and I sat there, replaying the day's conversation in my mind like I was reviewing an audit file. Something Sophie had said kept nagging at me. Not the apology, that was clearly rehearsed. No, it was something smaller, a phrase she'd used. "After everything that's changed for you." What had changed for me? My life was exactly the same as it had been for the past 5 years. Same house, same routine, same careful management of my pension and savings. Nothing had changed, unless she thought something had changed. I pulled out my phone and scrolled back through my call log, looking for anything unusual. And there it was, a call from mid-September, about a month ago. Unknown number. I'd answered it because I still get occasional calls from former clients. The woman on the line had introduced herself as Rachel, claimed to be a friend of the family. I'd been confused because I didn't know any Rachels, but she'd been pleasant enough, asking how I was doing, mentioning something about how lucky I'd been lately. I remember her exact words now. "I heard about your big luck with the tickets. You must be thrilled." I'd assumed she had the wrong person and politely ended the call. But now, turning it over in my mind, I wondered if that had been a fishing expedition, someone trying to confirm something about me. Then there was last week. I'd been downtown, coming out of my bank, where I'd gone to set up automatic payments for my homeowner's insurance. As I'd walked to my car, I'd noticed a vehicle that looked familiar, a dark blue sedan like Lenny's, parked across the street. When I'd looked directly at it, the car had pulled away quickly. At the time, I dismissed it. Phoenix is a big city, lots of dark blue sedans. But now? I got up and paced my study, my mind working through possibilities the way it used to work through tax returns. Sophie shows up after 10 years. Someone called asking about tickets and luck. Lenny's car near my bank. Sophie's eyes scanning my house like she was taking inventory. They were looking for something, or they thought I had something. But what? I sat back down and opened my laptop, checking my bank accounts, my investment portfolios, my retirement funds. Everything was exactly where it should be, modest but comfortable. Nothing had changed. No unexpected deposits, no windfalls, no lottery wins or inheritances. Yet Sophie seemed convinced something had changed for me. Convinced enough to break 10 years of silence and show up with a performance worthy of a television drama. The smart move would be to wait, to observe, to let them make the next move and reveal their hand. That's what I would have advised a client facing a potential fraud situation. Don't panic. Gather information, document everything. I pulled out a legal pad and started making notes. Date of Sophie's visit, her exact words, Lenny's behavior, Quinn's disinterest, the phone call from Rachel in September, the car near the bank. I wrote down everything I could remember, time-stamping each incident. If this was a con, and my gut said it was, then they would be back. People running a con always come back, each visit designed to build trust, to get closer to whatever they're after. Sophie's promise to visit again this weekend wasn't affection, it was strategy. Around midnight, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling fan making slow circles above me. The desert night was quiet, except for the occasional car passing on the street outside. My mind wouldn't settle. I'd spent my whole career protecting people from financial mistakes, from fraud, from their own poor decisions. I'd built a reputation on being thorough, being skeptical, being the person who asked the uncomfortable questions that revealed the truth. But I'd failed to protect my own marriage. I'd been so focused on work, on building security for the future, that I hadn't noticed my wife pulling away until she was gone. Sophie had blamed me for that, and maybe she'd been partially right. I'd been so good at seeing patterns in numbers and so blind to patterns in people. Not this time. Whatever Sophie and Lenny were planning, whatever they thought I had or could give them, I wasn't going to be an easy mark. I'd spent 40 years learning to spot deception in financial records. Time to apply those skills to my own family. If they wanted to play games, they'd pick the wrong accountant. I closed my eyes, already planning my next moves. First, I needed to understand what they believed about me. Then I needed to understand why they believed it. And finally, I needed to decide what to do about it. The last thought I had before drifting off was simple. If this is manipulation, they'll make a mistake. Everyone does. And when they do, I'll be ready. The next morning, I woke early and decided a walk would help clear my head. Phoenix mornings in October are perfect for that. Cool enough to think clearly, warm enough to be pleasant. I'd barely made it to the end of my driveway when I spotted Alan Grayson, my neighbor from across the street, watering his front lawn. Alan's a good guy. Retired postal worker, about my age. The kind of neighbor who keeps an eye out without being nosy. We wave, chat about the weather, complain about property taxes, normal neighbor stuff. "Francis," he called out, shutting off his hose. "Good to see you out and about." "Can't stay cooped up inside," I said, walking over. "Beautiful morning." "That it is." He wiped his hands on his pants. "Hey, I've been meaning to mention something. Wasn't sure if it mattered, but figured I'd tell you anyway." Something in his tone made me pay attention. "What's that?" "Last week, Tuesday, I think it was, I saw your daughter and that husband of hers at your place. You weren't home, I don't think. Your truck was gone." I kept my expression neutral. Last Tuesday, I'd been downtown meeting with my financial advisor about rolling over some certificates of deposit. The appointment had taken most of the afternoon. "They were just there?" I asked. "Yeah. Looked like they were peeking in your windows, actually, standing on your front porch, cupping their hands against the glass, looking inside. The husband was on his phone, showing your daughter something on the screen. They were having quite the animated conversation about whatever they were looking at." The coffee I'd drunk earlier suddenly felt heavy in my stomach. "Did you hear what they were saying?" "Not really. I was in my garage, working on sorting some boxes. But when they walked back to their car, I heard the husband, Lenny is it, talking on his phone. He was speaking loud enough that I caught a few words. Something about the old fool and big money." Alan shifted uncomfortably. "Look, I don't want to cause trouble. I assumed you knew they were coming by. Family stuff, you know? But then yesterday when your daughter showed up and you seemed genuinely surprised, I thought maybe I should mention it." "I'm glad you did, Alan. Really? Thank you. They in some kind of trouble? Need money or something?" "Something like that," I said, managing a smile I didn't feel. I finished my walk on autopilot, my mind racing. Sophie and Lenny had been surveilling my house. Looking for what? Evidence of wealth? Checking to see if I was home. And that phone call, the old fool and big money. When I got back inside, I made myself another coffee and sat at my kitchen table, forcing myself to think chronologically, to piece together the timeline like I would an audit trail. Then I remembered something else. Late September, maybe 3 weeks ago, I'd been at my bank. Not the main branch where I do most of my business, but a smaller one near the grocery store. I'd been standing at the counter when the teller, a young woman named Maria, had asked me an odd question. "Mr. Collins, have you changed your contact information recently?" "No," I'd said. "Why?" "We had someone call yesterday trying to access information about your account. They claimed to be family. Said they were your daughter, actually. But the number they were calling from didn't match our records, and when we asked security questions, they couldn't answer them correctly." I'd felt a flash of alarm then. What kind of information were they after? Account balances, recent transactions, that sort of thing. Standard phishing attempt, probably. We didn't give them anything, of course. We never do without proper verification. But I wanted to make sure you knew about it, in case you wanted to add extra security to your account. I'd thanked her and immediately added a verbal password to my accounts, an extra layer of protection that required anyone calling about my accounts to provide a specific phrase. At the time, I'd thought it was just some random scammer who'd somehow gotten my name. But it hadn't been random at all, had it? Sophie or Lenny, probably Lenny, had tried to access my bank accounts. They'd been checking my financial situation, preparing for something. I pulled out my legal pad again and added these new details to my notes, drawing connecting lines between events. Alan's observation about the window peeping, Maria's warning about the phone call. The pattern was getting clearer and uglier with each piece of information. They'd been investigating me, spying on my house, attempting to access my bank records, all before showing up with their tearful reunion act. This wasn't a spontaneous decision to reconcile. This was premeditated, calculated. But why? What did they think I had? What had convinced them to go through all this effort? I needed answers, and I needed to understand what they believed before I could figure out how to handle this situation. Because one thing was becoming crystal clear. Sophie and Lenny were hunting for something specific, and whatever it was, they were convinced I had it. Sophie called that afternoon while I was reviewing my notes. "Dad, I hope I'm not bothering you." "Not at all," I lied. "I was thinking maybe Lenny and I could come by tomorrow. I know we just saw you, but I'd really love to talk more. Heart to heart, you know? Without Quinn this time. Just adults." Heart to heart, right. More like wallet to wallet. "Sure," I said. "Tomorrow works." "Really?" She sounded almost surprised. "That's wonderful. How about around 2? 2 is fine. Great. We'll see you then. Love you, Dad." She hung up before I could respond, which was probably for the best, since the words would have stuck in my throat anyway. They arrived promptly at 2 the next day, October 17th. I'd spent the morning preparing, mentally running through questions, traps I wanted to set. If they were hunting for money, they'd eventually have to show their hand. "Thanks for having us," Sophie said as I let them in. She was wearing a dress this time, looking more put together. Lenny had traded his usual T-shirt for a button-down. They were dressing up for something. We settled in the living room. I offered coffee, which they accepted. We made small talk about the weather, about traffic, about nothing important. I watched them both carefully, noting how Sophie's eyes kept darting around the room, how Lenny's leg bounced with barely contained energy. Then, about 20 minutes in, Lenny cleared his throat. "Francis, I gotta be honest with you. Things have been tough lately. The economy, you know? My business hit some rough patches." I knew for a fact that Lenny's business was usually whatever get-rich-quick scheme he'd discovered that month. Last I'd heard, it had been selling supplements online. Before that, day trading. "That's unfortunate," I said neutrally. "Yeah, and with Quinn getting older, expenses just keep piling up. Private school, activities, you know how it is." I didn't, actually. When Sophie was growing up, she'd gone to public school, and we'd been just fine. But I nodded anyway. Sophie jumped in, her voice careful. "What Lenny's trying to say is that we could really use some help. Family helping family, you know? And we were thinking, maybe there's a way we could help each other." "Help each other how?" "Well," she glanced at Lenny, "you're retired now, living alone in this big house. That must be lonely sometimes. Maybe expensive to maintain." "Ah, here we go." "I manage," I said. "Right. But imagine if we were around more. Quinn could help with yard work. Lenny's handy with repairs. We could be here for you, Dad. Make sure you're not alone." "In exchange for money." She didn't say it, but it hung in the air between us. "That's a generous offer," I said, keeping my tone pleasant. "Let me think about it." Lenny looked frustrated, but Sophie touched his arm. "Of course. Take all the time you need. We just want you to know we're here for you. Whatever you need." Whatever I need. That was rich. After they left, I sat in my study and added this encounter to my timeline. The pattern was clear now. They were closing in, getting bolder. But they still hadn't said what they really wanted. They were testing me, seeing how receptive I'd be. Then I remembered one more thing. 2 weeks ago, early October, I'd been at the grocery store. The cashier, a middle-aged woman named Patricia, had mentioned something odd as she rang up my items. Mr. Collins, I had a strange situation the other day. A young woman came in, showed me a photo on her phone, asked if I'd seen you buying champagne or celebrating anything special recently. A young woman? I'd asked, though I'd already known. Yes, blonde, pretty, maybe 35. Said she was your daughter, but couldn't remember if you'd mentioned something important. Wanted to make sure she hadn't forgotten a birthday or anniversary. Patricia had frowned. I told her I don't keep track of what customers buy, and anyway, it's none of my business. I'd thanked Patricia for her discretion. Now it made perfect sense. They'd been checking to see if I'd been celebrating something. A windfall, a lottery win, some sudden financial change. But why would they think that? Where had this idea come from? I needed professional help. Someone who could dig deeper than I could, who could find out what Sophie and Lenny actually knew, or thought they knew. I opened my laptop and searched for private investigators in Phoenix. Found one with excellent reviews. Jack Morissette, former Phoenix PD detective, now running his own firm. His website promised discretion and results. I called his office and left a message explaining I needed help with a family matter. Nothing illegal, just information gathering. He called back within an hour. Mr. Collins, this is Jack Morissette. Got your message. When can you come in? Is tomorrow morning too soon? Tomorrow's perfect. 9 a.m. work for you? I'll be there. That night, lying in bed, I realized something had shifted in me. 2 days ago, I'd been confused and hurt by Sophie's sudden reappearance. Yesterday, I'd been angry at the discovery of their surveillance. Tonight, I was something different. Calculated, focused, ready. They wanted to play games? Fine. But they'd forgotten something important. I'd spent 40 years finding money people tried to hide, spotting fraud, following paper trails others thought were buried. I was good at this, patient, methodical. If Sophie and Lenny were running a con, they were about to learn they'd picked the wrong mark. Because I didn't just spot problems. I documented them, proved them, and when the time was right, I made sure there were consequences. Tomorrow, I'd start building my case. And when I had all the pieces, when I understood exactly what they were after and why, I'd show them what happened when you tried to manipulate someone who'd spent his whole life seeing through manipulation. The thought didn't make me smile, but it did help me sleep. Jack Morissette's office was exactly what I expected from a former cop, turned private investigator, functional no-nonsense with certificates on the wall and a faint smell of coffee. I'd called him the day before, and here I was on the morning of October 18th, sitting across from him at his desk. Mr. Collins, he said, sliding a manila folder across to me. I've got your answers, and they're interesting. I opened the folder. Inside were printouts of text messages, photos of Lenny at what looked like a bar, and handwritten notes in Jack's neat block letters. Your son-in-law's been busy, Jack said. He's been telling anyone who'll listen that you won the lottery. $8 million, to be specific. My stomach tightened. But I didn't. I know that. You know that. But Lenny doesn't. Jack leaned back in his chair. Here's what happened. About 6 weeks ago, a guy named Frank Coleman, lives 2 blocks from you, about your age, gray hair like yours, won $50,000 in the Arizona lottery. Small win, relatively speaking. He bought the ticket at the Quick Stop on McDowell. I've never been to that Quick Stop, I said. Right. But Lenny's got a friend who works there, Danny Martinez. Danny sees lots of elderly customers buying tickets. One day he's having a beer with Lenny, mentions this old guy who hits it big, describes him as tall, gray-haired, drives a dark truck. Lenny asks if he remembers the name. Danny says something like, Collins, I think. The pieces were falling into place. He confused me with this Coleman. Exactly. But here's where it gets better. Jack tapped another page. Lenny didn't just hear 50,000. Somehow in the bar gossip, and I've tracked this through 3 sources, the number got inflated. By the time Lenny heard it third hand, it had become 8 million, and he was already primed to believe it because he's desperate. He owes money to some questionable people. How much? $47,000. Gambling debts mostly, bad investments in crypto. He's got people pressuring him, and not politely. Jack pulled out another photo. Lenny meeting with 2 men outside a restaurant, looking uncomfortable. These gentlemen aren't the patient type. So that was it. Lenny heard a rumor, jumped to conclusions, saw me as his salvation, And Sophie, my own daughter, went along with it. 10 years of silence, and she shows up because she thinks I'm hiding millions. There's more, Jack said. Your daughter's been researching you online. She found out about your consulting work, saw that you've been comfortable. She convinced herself the rumor must be true. Why else would you be so quiet about it? The irony would have been funny if it wasn't so painful. I need everything documented, I said. Every conversation Lenny had, every person who heard the rumor. Everything. Jack smiled slightly. Already done. It's all in the folder. Dates, times, witnesses. I spent the rest of October 18th and all of the 19th reading through Jack's report, making notes, forming a plan. The accountant and me appreciated the thoroughness. Every claim was sourced, every timeline verified. On the afternoon of October 20th, my phone rang. Sophie, Dad, can I come by today? Just me this time. I really want to talk about something important. Of course, I said, injecting warmth into my voice that I didn't feel. Come around 4. She arrived wearing what I recognized as her serious outfit, the one she used to wear to job interviews. This was her negotiation costume. We sat in the living room. She accepted tea. Dad, I'm just going to be honest with you, she began. Things have changed for you recently, haven't they? What do you mean? I mean, life has a way of bringing opportunities, unexpected blessings. She leaned forward. And I think when those blessings come, they're meant to be shared with family, don't you? I let silence hang between us. Then, as if I couldn't help myself, I said, Sometimes luck comes when you least expect it. Her eyes lit up, actually lit up, like a slot machine hitting jackpot. That's exactly what I mean, she said, trying to contain her excitement. And families should celebrate together, support each other, maybe even help each other with challenges. What kind of challenges? Well, Lenny's business has had some setbacks. Nothing we can't handle, but it would be easier if we had support. Financial support. From family. There it was, the ask. I stood up, walked to the window, made a show of thinking deeply. Then I turned back to her. Sophie, why don't you and Lenny come by tomorrow? Around noon. Bring Quinn, too. I think it's time we had a serious conversation about family and the future. Really? Her face flushed with what I'm sure she thought was victory. Dad, that would be wonderful. Come to my study, I said. I have some important papers I want to show you. Documents that affect the whole family. After she left, practically floating out my door, I sat in my study and made 3 phone calls. The first was to Arthur Wells, a notary I'd worked with for years. Arthur, I need a favor, and I need you to bring a camera. The second was to a print shop downtown. I need a replica lottery ticket. Very specific requirements. The third was to myself, really. A reminder of what I was about to do and why. They wanted millions that didn't exist. They'd lied, manipulated, spied on me. They'd broken 10 years of silence not out of love, but out of greed. So I'd give them what they were looking for. I'd give them exactly what their greed deserved. And tomorrow, we'd all find out what $8 million of nothing looked like. October 21st arrived with the kind of clear Arizona sky that makes you believe in fresh starts. I didn't feel like starting fresh. I felt like ending something that should have ended a decade ago. By 11:30, everything was in place. Arthur Wells, the notary, was positioned in the corner of my study behind a bookshelf, where he had a clear view of the room. He'd set up a small camera on a tripod, hidden behind some law books. It was recording. You're sure about this, Francis? Arthur had asked when I'd explained my plan. I've never been more sure of anything. The fake lottery ticket was in my safe. A perfect replica I'd had made, complete with the Arizona Lottery logo and the number $8,000 printed in bold letters. It looked real enough to fool anyone who wanted desperately to believe it was real. The doorbell rang at exactly noon. Of course it did. Greed is always punctual. I let them in. Sophie with her practiced smile. Lenny with barely contained anticipation. Quinn trailing behind, already on her phone. Thank you all for coming, I said, keeping my voice warm but mysterious. Please, follow me to my study. We walked through my house in single file, like a procession. My study is my sanctuary, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, my old desk from my consulting days, filing cabinets full of decades of carefully organized records, and in the corner, the safe my father had given me 40 years ago. "Have a seat," I gestured to the chairs I'd arranged. They sat, Sophie and Lenny side by side, Quinn in a chair by the window. The air felt thick with expectation. Sophie was gripping Lenny's hand. Lenny's leg was bouncing again, that nervous tell I'd noticed before. Quinn looked bored, but I caught her glancing at the safe. "I've been thinking a lot about family lately," I began, pacing slowly, "about what we owe each other, about loyalty and honesty." "That's exactly what we've been thinking too," Sophie said quickly. "Family is everything." "Is it?" I stopped pacing. Because I remember 10 years ago, family didn't seem to matter much. I remember being called cold, distant, blamed for things that weren't my fault. Sophie's smile faltered. "Dad, I apologize for that. People change." "They do," I agreed. "Sometimes they change for the better. Sometimes—" "Well?" I walked to the safe, letting my hand rest on the dial. They all leaned forward, like plants bending toward light. "There are things in this safe," I said slowly, "that represent years of hard work, careful planning, decisions about the future." I started turning the dial, documents that could change everything for this family. The dial clicked as I entered the combination. Lenny's legs stopped bouncing. Sophie held her breath. Even Quinn put down her phone. "When fortune comes to someone," I continued, my hand on the safe's handle, "it reveals their true character, their real priorities." I pulled the handle. The safe door swung open with a metallic groan, and that's when I grabbed my chest. The pain wasn't real, but my performance was. I gasped, staggered back from the safe, clutched my left arm. "My chest," I managed to croak. "Can't breathe." I let my knees buckle and went down hard on the carpet, making sure to fall where I could see them through half-closed eyes. For a split second, nobody moved. Then Sophie screamed, "Dad!" But she didn't move toward me. Her eyes went straight to the safe. Lenny shot out of his chair, not toward me, but toward the safe. His hands were reaching for the documents inside before Sophie even finished screaming. And Quinn, my own granddaughter, pulled out her phone. But not to call 911. I watched through slitted eyes as she tilted it, adjusting the angle. She was taking a picture of me lying on the floor. "Oh my God," Sophie was saying, but she'd gotten up too, moving toward the safe. "Lenny, is that it?" A piece of paper had fallen out when Lenny yanked open the safe door wider. The fake lottery ticket, landing face up on my desk, where the light caught the numbers just right. $8 million. Lenny grabbed it. Actually grabbed it, his hands shaking. Sophie, look." "We need to call an ambulance," Sophie said, but her voice was distant, distracted. She was staring at the ticket in Lenny's hands. "Is he breathing?" Lenny asked, not looking at me. Quinn took another photo. I lay there, watching them through barely open eyes, watching their true selves emerge like developing photographs. Every horrible thing I'd suspected about them was confirmed in these terrible, perfect seconds. Then I opened my eyes fully and sat up. "The show's over," I said, my voice cold and clear. Sophie screamed again, a different kind of scream this time. Shock instead of fear. Lenny stumbled backward, still clutching the fake ticket. What the—" "You can come out now, Arthur," I called. Arthur stepped out from behind the bookshelf, camera in hand, its red recording light still blinking. "What is this?" Sophie's voice was shrill. "What's going on?" I stood up, brushing off my pants, and looked at each of them in turn. "This is the truth about what you came here for, the truth about who you really are." Lenny was staring at the ticket in his hands, and I watched reality start to sink in. "This isn't real, is it?" "About as real as your concern for me," I said. "Arthur, did you get everything?" "Every second," Arthur confirmed. "Crystal clear." I turned to face my daughter, my son-in-law, and my granddaughter. "You rushed past your dying father to grab money. You took selfies instead of calling for help. You revealed exactly what you value, and it isn't family." The silence that followed was the loudest sound in the world. The silence stretched between us like a chasm. Sophie's face had gone from flushed excitement to pale shock in seconds. Lenny still held the fake lottery ticket, staring at it like it might transform into something real. Quinn had lowered her phone, finally understanding this wasn't content for social media. "Dad, what are you talking about?" Sophie's voice cracked. "That ticket. is as real as your concern for me, I said, walking to my desk and picking up a folder. Arthur, would you explain what you witnessed? Arthur Wells stepped forward, still holding the camera. I recorded the entire incident. The video clearly shows Mr. Collins appearing to have a medical emergency. It also shows Mr. Rogers immediately moving toward the safe, rather than toward Mr. Collins. It shows Ms. Rogers looking at the safe contents before checking on her father. And it shows Ms. Quinn Rogers taking photographs of her grandfather lying on the floor. Lenny's face turned red. You set us up. I gave you a test, I corrected. You failed spectacularly. This is entrapment. Lenny threw the fake ticket on my desk. Actually, I haven't done anything illegal. I pretended to have a health issue in my own home. You revealed your true priorities on your own. Sophie found her voice. We were concerned about you. We were just checking to see if the money was real before you called for help. I opened the folder and spread documents across my desk. Let me show you what else I know. I pulled out the first report. This is from Jack Morissette, a private investigator. He tracked down the rumor you've been spreading about my supposed lottery win. Turns out there was a mix-up. A man named Frank Coleman, who lives 2 blocks away, won $50,000. But that became $8 million somewhere between the bar and your desperate imagination, Lenny. Lenny's jaw clenched. You had us investigated. After I discovered you'd been investigating me, I pulled out another document. Here's a statement from Alan Grayson, my neighbor. He saw you two at my house last week when I wasn't home, peering in my windows, planning. This wasn't a spontaneous reconciliation. Sophie's tears were real now, but they weren't tears of remorse. They were tears of a con artist whose con had been exposed. We just wanted to reconnect. The money didn't matter. Really? I pulled out another paper. Then explain this. A bank statement showing someone claiming to be my daughter tried to access information about my accounts. Or this, a statement from Patricia, the cashier at my grocery store, who says, a young woman matching your description came in asking if I'd been celebrating anything recently. You weren't trying to reconnect. You were investigating. I walked around the desk to stand in front of them. All three looked smaller now, diminished by truth. Here's what's going to happen, I said, my voice calm but absolute. You have 24 hours to leave my life, permanently. No calls, no visits, no contact of any kind. If I see you, if I hear from you, if you try to reach out in any way, I take all this evidence to the police and file charges for attempted fraud and harassment. Fraud? Lenny sputtered. We didn't defraud anyone. You spread false information about a lottery win. You attempted to manipulate me based on that false information. You tried to access my private financial information. Arizona takes fraud seriously, especially when it involves vulnerable elderly citizens. I smiled thinly. And yes, I'm old enough to qualify for those protections. Quinn spoke for the first time since the reveal, her voice small. Grandpa, please. Don't, I said quietly. You took pictures of me lying on the floor. You didn't call for help. You thought about social media. You're 14, Quinn. Old enough to know better. Sophie stood abruptly. You're a cruel man. You always were. This whole thing, this trap, it's sick. What's sick, I said, is a daughter who disappears for 10 years and only comes back when she thinks there's money. What's sick is breaking into someone's bank information. What's sick is spreading lies and spying and manipulating. I just held up a mirror. You don't like what you see. That's not my problem anymore. I handed Sophie the folder. Take this. Copies of everything. Consider it a reminder of why you're going to leave me alone. Lenny grabbed Sophie's arm. Come on. We don't need this. They moved toward the door, a small defeated procession. At the threshold, Sophie turned back. I hope you're happy, she said bitterly, living here alone with your self-righteousness. I'm not happy, I said honestly, but I'm free, and that's more than you'll ever be as long as you keep chasing easy money that doesn't exist. They left. The door closed. Arthur and I stood in the sudden silence. That was harder than you expected, Arthur observed quietly. Yes, I admitted, but necessary. What if they don't leave you alone? I looked at the evidence spread across my desk. Then I go to the police, and I've got a lawyer on speed dial. Either way, I'm done being their target. Arthur packed up his camera. For what it's worth, Francis, you did the right thing. After he left, I sat at my desk for a long time, looking at the papers that had ended my relationship with my daughter for good. Outside, the Phoenix sun was setting, painting my study walls in shades of orange and gold. I'd won, but winning felt a lot like grieving. I should have known they wouldn't go quietly. For 2 days, October 22nd and 23rd, I heard nothing. I allowed myself to hope they'd accepted reality. I should have known better. On the morning of October the 24th, my doorbell rang. I checked the peephole and saw Sophie, Lenny, and a man I didn't recognize carrying a briefcase. I opened the door, but didn't invite them in. "You have 5 seconds to leave my property." The lawyer stepped forward, thin with slicked back hair and a cheap suit. "Mr. Collins, I'm Randall Pierce, attorney at law. I represent Ms. Rogers and Mr. Rogers in a matter of emotional distress and elder abuse." I almost laughed. Elder abuse. That's creative. "This isn't a joke," Sophie said, her voice hard. Gone was any pretense of the loving daughter. "You set us up. You humiliated us." "In my own home, which is legal in Arizona." I looked at Pierce. "Did they mention they tried to access my bank accounts? That they spread false rumors about me winning the lottery?" Pierce's expression didn't change, but I saw a flicker in his eyes. They hadn't told him everything. "My clients are willing to forego pressing charges in exchange for a settlement of $100,000 to compensate them for emotional trauma." $100,000. I repeated it slowly. "For what?" Lenny stepped forward, his face red. "You owe us, old man. You lied to us about the lottery." "I never once said I won the lottery. You assumed that." "You let us believe it." Sophie's voice rose. "You manipulated us. I let you reveal who you really are. There's a difference." Pierce pulled a document from his briefcase. "Mr. Collins, my clients are prepared to make your life very difficult if you don't cooperate. They can file complaints about your mental state. They can challenge your competency." Ah, there it was. Not a lawsuit, a threat campaign. "So to be clear," I said, "you're threatening to spread lies about me unless I pay you money. That's extortion, Mr. Pierce. That's a felony." "It's not extortion if we're simply telling the truth," Sophie said, "about how you neglected me as a child, about how you were emotionally abusive." She was improvising, creating a narrative. "We'll give you 24 hours, Pierce said. "After that, we file. Even if you win, the court costs and reputational damage will be significant." They left. I watched them walk to their car, a rental, probably staying in a cheap motel, burning through Lenny's remaining money, getting more desperate. I went inside and immediately called Gloria Haydenreich, my lawyer. I'd worked with her for years during my consulting days. She was smart, thorough, and didn't back down. "Francis," she answered on the second ring. "I was wondering when you'd call. You heard? Small community among family law attorneys. Randall Pierce is known for taking questionable cases. He's facing discipline from the Bar Association. The fact that your family hired him tells me everything about their case. They're threatening to spread lies about me unless I pay them $100,000. That's extortion. Did Pierce say that explicitly?" "Close enough." "Good news. Intimidation only works on people who scare easily. I'm guessing you don't scare easily, Francis. Not anymore. Then here's what we do. I'm drafting a cease and desist letter documenting everything. The false lottery rumors, the attempted bank fraud, the harassment. I'm also reaching out to the Arizona Lottery Commission. Spreading false information about lottery winnings is taken very seriously." "Will that be enough?" "It'll be a start. Francis, they're bluffing. They don't have a case. He's hoping you'll pay to make them go away. But if you pay, they'll just come back for more." "So we call their bluff?" "Exactly. I'll have documents ready by tomorrow morning. We'll invite them to a meeting at my office and show them exactly how much trouble they're in." After I hung up, I sat in my living room, looking out at the street. The Phoenix afternoon was bright and hot. Part of me wondered if I should just pay them. $100,000 would hurt, but it wouldn't ruin me. But that's exactly what they were counting on. They were betting that the easier path would be more appealing than fighting. They were betting I'd gotten soft in retirement. They'd bet wrong. I picked up my phone and made one more call. To Jack Morissette. "Jack, I need you to keep monitoring Lenny and Sophie Rogers. I need to know where they're staying, who they're talking to, what they're planning." "You think they're going to escalate?" "I think they're desperate, and desperate people make mistakes. I want to know about those mistakes when they happen. You got it. I spent the rest of the day preparing, organizing my documents, making timelines, building my case the way I used to build audit reports, methodically, thoroughly, leaving no room for doubt. If Sophie and Lenny wanted war, they'd get it. But they'd forgotten something important. I'd spent 40 years winning battles, fought with paperwork and patience, and I'd never lost one yet. On the morning of October 25th, Gloria called. It's done. I sent the letter. They have an appointment at my office tomorrow at 10 a.m. I strongly suggested they attend. Strongly suggested. I may have mentioned that failure to appear would result in immediate filing of charges with the Phoenix Police Department and the Arizona Attorney General's office. That tends to motivate people. Will they show? Oh, they'll show. People like your daughter and son-in-law always think they can talk their way out of trouble. They'll come expecting to negotiate. Instead, they're going to get educated. The next day, October 26th, I arrived at Gloria's office at 9:30. Her building was in downtown Phoenix, all glass and steel, the kind of place that broadcasts professional competence. Gloria met me in the lobby. Ready for this? She asked. I've been ready for 2 weeks. We went up to her conference room, and there, already waiting, was Gwen Thompson from the Arizona Lottery Commission. She was a woman in her mid-40s, professionally dressed, with the calm demeanor of someone who dealt with lottery fraud cases before. Mr. Collins, she shook my hand. I've reviewed the materials Gloria sent me. This is quite a situation. That's one word for it. At exactly 10 a.m. the receptionist buzzed. Ms. Haydenreich, your 10 o'clock is here. Send them in. Sophie, Lenny, and their bargain basement lawyer, Randall Pierce, walked into the conference room. They stopped when they saw the three of us waiting. What is this? Pierce demanded. I thought this was a meeting with Mr. Collins. It is, Gloria said smoothly. Please sit down. They sat, but I could see the wariness in their eyes. Lenny kept glancing at the door like he was calculating escape routes. Sophie's face had that pinched look of someone realizing they'd walked into a trap. Let me introduce everyone, Gloria began. This is Gwen Thompson from the Arizona Lottery Commission. Ms. Thompson, these are Sophie Rogers, Lenny Rogers, Quinn Rogers, and their attorney, Randall Pierce. Gwen opened a folder. I'm here in my official capacity to inform you that spreading false information about lottery winnings is a serious offense under Arizona law. It damages public trust in the lottery system and constitutes fraud. We didn't spread false information, Lenny started. You told at least 7 people, according to our investigation, that Mr. Collins won $8 million in the lottery. You used this false claim to justify your demands for money from him. That's textbook fraud. Sophie turned pale. We thought it was true. Someone told us. Intent doesn't matter, Gwen continued. You made no effort to verify the information. You didn't contact the Lottery Commission. You simply spread rumors and then attempted to profit from them. Gloria placed another folder on the table. And then there's the extortion, the threats to damage Mr. Collins's reputation unless he paid you $100,000, the false claims of elder abuse, the attempted unauthorized access to his bank accounts. Should I continue? Pierce tried to rally. My clients were attempting to reconnect with family. Any misunderstanding. There's video evidence, I said quietly. It was the first time I'd spoken, and everyone looked at me. Video of them rushing to grab money instead of helping me when I appeared to be having a heart attack. Video of my granddaughter taking photos instead of calling for help. It's all documented, time-stamped, and witnessed by a licensed notary. Quinn started crying. Not sad tears, angry tears. The kind of crying that comes when you realize you've been caught and there's no way out. Here's what's going to happen, Gloria said. She slid papers across the table. You're going to sign a legally binding agreement. You will have no contact with Mr. Collins. No calls, no visits, no emails, no social media contact, nothing. You will not discuss him with anyone. You will not attempt to damage his reputation. You will not come within 500 feet of his residence. If you violate any of these terms, we file criminal charges immediately. No warnings, no second chances. And if we don't sign? Lenny asked, his voice weak. Then we file charges today, Gwen said. Wire fraud, attempted fraud, elder abuse, extortion, harassment. Take your pick. Some of those carry federal penalties. Pierce leaned over to whisper to Sophie and Lenny. I couldn't hear what he said, but I could guess. He was telling them they had no choice. He was telling them to sign. This is insane, Sophie said, but her voice had no strength behind it. He's my father. He did this to us. He trapped us. He gave you a choice, I said, and I let ice creep into my voice. Every step of the way, you chose greed. You chose manipulation. You chose lies. I just gave you enough rope. You're a cruel man, Sophie whispered. No, I said. I'm just done being your mark. Lenny grabbed the pen first. He signed with quick, angry strokes. Sophie followed, tears streaming down her face now. Real tears, finally, but tears of defeat rather than manipulation. Quinn signed last, her hand shaking. Pierce gathered the papers. We're done here. Yes, Gloria said. You are. They stood. Lenny looked like he wanted to say something, maybe make one last threat. But Pierce grabbed his arm and steered him toward the door. Sophie stopped at the threshold and turned back to look at me. I met her eyes and gave her nothing. No anger, no sympathy, just the cold assessment of someone who'd finally seen the truth. She left. The door closed. The silence that followed felt like the end of something. Or maybe the beginning. Greed catches everyone who chases it, I said quietly. October the 27th dawned clear and cool, the kind of Phoenix morning that reminds you why people move here. I sat on my back patio with my coffee, watching the sunrise paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. For the first time in 2 weeks, I felt like I could breathe. My phone buzzed, a text from Gloria. No violations reported. They're gone. I texted back a thank you and set the phone aside. Later that morning, I was watering my plants when Alan walked over from across the street. Hey, Francis. Haven't seen your daughter around lately. Everything okay? Everything's fine, I said. Sometimes problems solve themselves when you give them the right push. Alan nodded slowly. I heard some things. Rumors in the neighborhood. Something about lottery tickets? Just rumors, I said. People hear what they want to hear. Well, whatever happened, you seem more relaxed. That's good to see. After he left, I went inside to my study. The folder with all the evidence sat on my desk. Jack's investigation report, Arthur's video, the bank statements, witness accounts, everything meticulously organized. I picked it up, feeling the weight of truth. I carried it to the safe, the same safe where this had all reached its climax. I spun the dial, entered the combination, and placed the folder inside. Everything documented, everything preserved, just in case. But I didn't think I'd need it. Sophie and Lenny had learned their lesson. They'd learned that easy money doesn't exist, that cons have consequences, and that sometimes the person you think is a victim knows exactly what game you're playing. I closed the safe, locked it all away. On October 28th, I received a certified letter from Gloria's office. Inside was a brief note. Roger's family has left Phoenix. New address is Tampa, Florida. No contact attempts made. Agreement holding. You're officially free. Gee. I smiled. Tampa was about as far from Phoenix as they could get, without leaving the continental U.S. Good. That evening I sat on my patio with a glass of wine, a nice Cabernet I'd been saving. I watched another sunset, this one even more beautiful. Or maybe I was just seeing it more clearly now. My phone rang. Jack Morissette. Just wanted to give you a final update before I close out your file. I tracked them to the airport yesterday. They took a flight to Tampa with one-way tickets. Looked pretty defeated. Minimal luggage. Looks like they're staying gone. Good to know. Thank you, Jack. Send me your final invoice. Already did. Francis, for what it's worth, you handled this better than most people would have. A lot of folks would have just given them money to make them go away. That's exactly what they were counting on, that I'd gotten soft. Well, you proved them wrong. Take care of yourself. After the call, I sat in the gathering darkness and thought about Sophie. Really thought about her. About the little girl who used to sit on my lap and ask me to read her stories. About the teenager who'd rolled her eyes at my jokes but laughed anyway. About the young woman who'd blame me for her mother leaving and cut me out of her life. I'd lost my daughter a long time ago, probably before she ever left. The person who showed up 2 weeks ago wasn't her. It was just someone wearing her face, chasing money that didn't exist. Maybe she'd learned something from this. Maybe in Tampa, starting over, she'd realized that shortcuts don't work, that manipulation has costs, that family means more than dollar signs. Maybe, but probably not. Some people never learn. They just move on to the next scheme, the next con, the next easy mark, and that was okay. It wasn't my problem anymore. I'd protected myself, stood up for myself, and done it all without breaking a single law. I'd simply held up a mirror and let her see her own reflection. That was enough. Through the sliding glass door, I could see into my study. The safe was closed. The evidence was stored. The chapter was finished. Tomorrow I'd wake up to another Phoenix morning, another day of peaceful retirement, another day of being exactly who I was, methodical, careful, and free. No daughter, no son-in-law, no granddaughter. The empty spaces where they should have been would always hurt, at least a little. But I'd learned to live with absence before, and in exchange for that absence, I had something invaluable. Peace. No con artists in my life, no manipulators, no one trying to take what wasn't theirs. I raised my glass to the last light in the western sky and spoke the words that had been forming in my mind for days. Greed is the trap people set for themselves. The stars began to appear, one by one. The desert air cooled. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called. The world kept turning. I'd won by refusing to play their game on their terms. I'd won by setting a trap that caught nothing but the truth. And now I'd won by letting them go and moving on with my life. The wine was good. The evening was perfect. And for the first time in a very long time, I felt completely, utterly at peace. Tomorrow would bring new mornings, new problems, new joys. But tonight, I just sat and enjoyed the quiet victory of being myself, unbothered and unmanipulated, in the home I'd built with my own hands and defended with my own wits. It was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.